I think it's important to preface with a few thoughts in the wake of what our nation is experiencing right now. Um, Undoubtedly, there's tension in the streets of every city in America, ours included. And um, I just want to express my sincere understanding and appreciation for those who are expressing themselves and who are out in the streets today. I just drove by not too long ago, Salisbury University, where there is a peaceful gathering at the corner of Route 13 and College Avenue. People expressing solidarity with our brothers and sisters who are have found themselves in a situation where their power dynamics are stacked against them, and it's important, I think, that we all stand up for those who have found themselves victimized, stand up for those who have found themselves to be in any way treated as less than the full
Can we turn the
human
music down
being
until we're done reading?
and
I'm
citizen
sorry.
that they are. Can somebody mute that? There we go. All right. So the proclamation reads, Friday, June 5th, 2020 marks the 6th annual observance of National Gun Violence Awareness Day to honor and remember all victims and survivors of gun violence.
It's the agenda. We'll just be on the call together.
Angela, could you please mute yourself?
And to reaffirm that more must be done to reduce gun violence in our country, because more than 100 Americans are killed every day by gun violence, and an average of more than 13,000 gun homicides occur each year. And Americans are 25 times more likely to die by gun homicide than people in other high-income countries, with gun homicides occurring predominantly in cities and more than half of all firearm-related gun deaths in the nation occurring in only 127 cities. The state of Maryland has the 35th highest rate of gun deaths in the United States, with 682 gun deaths every year at a rate of 11.3 deaths per 100,000 people. America has a proud heritage of responsible gun ownership, and support for the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens goes hand in hand with keeping guns away from people with dangerous histories. Municipal officials and law enforcement officers know their communities best and are by far the most familiar with local criminal activity and how to address it, and are best positioned to understand how to keep their citizens safe. And the city of Salisbury joins cities across the nation working to end the senseless violence with evidence-based solutions, because public safety in communities continues to be among the top priorities and responsibilities of all municipal officials. The recent coronavirus pandemic has drastically impacted American communities and individuals sheltering in place, creating the potential for situations where access to firearms could pose increased risk for intimate partner gun deaths, suicide by gun, and unintentional shootings. National Gun Violence Awareness Day was originally inspired by a group of Hadia Pendleton's friends to honor her memory after she was tragically shot and killed just 2 weeks after marching in the January 2013 presidential inaugural parade, and who should now be celebrating her 23rd birthday. Hadia's friends asked their classmates to commemorate her life by wearing orange to symbolize the value of human life, because hunters wear orange to announce themselves to other hunters when in the woods, alerting them not to shoot. And Americans can raise awareness about gun violence and honor the lives of gun violence victims and survivors by wearing orange on June 5th, 2020. And the city of Salisbury renews its commitments to reduce gun violence and pledges to do all it can to keep firearms out of the wrong hands and to encourage responsible gun ownership in order to help keep its citizens safe. Now, therefore, I, Jacob Day, Mayor of the City of Salisbury, do hereby proclaim June 5th, 2020 as National Gun Violence Awareness Day in our city. And I urge all citizens to wear orange in support of their local community's efforts to prevent the tragic effects of gun violence and to honor the lives of gun violence victims and survivors, because the value of a human life is priceless.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well said.
Mr. President, I also want to acknowledge that we have some representatives with us of this coalition, and I'd like to. I think Nancy's muted, but maybe we can unmute Nancy Osborne.
Yes, I'm here. We are just over the moon with this. This is wonderful. Thank you very, very much. I know this has been a very busy agenda. We won't take any more time because the proclamation is lengthy for a very complicated situation that we're trying to correct in America, and we're trying to help with our 6 million strong members. So we are here in the Lower Shore. If you want to get a hold of Moms Demand Action or Be Smart, they're both great groups, and we're doing what we can. Thank you for joining us. We do appreciate you.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you. Thank you for everything you do.
I also have Nicole and Linda here and a few others that I can't see everybody's names. So just wear orange this weekend, especially Friday. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy, Linda, and Nicole for being present and for being strong advocates.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Nancy. At this time, I'll call for a motion and a second to adopt the legislative agenda.
So move.
Ms. Jackson?
Second.
Ms. Blake is the second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Ms. Jackson?
Aye.
Aye.
Ms. Blake?
Aye.
Aye.
Ms. Gregory?
Aye. Sorry, helicopter going over.
And the chair votes aye. That's 4-0, 4 with 1 absent. Mr. Boda is not here tonight. Not feeling well. This time I'll entertain a motion to approve ordinance number 2599 for the second reading.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Blake, was that Ms. Blake? And Ms. Jackson, I believe. There's an echo in there somehow. It's hard to hear you, so I apologize. Mr. Tillman, could you read the
Thank you.
ordinance?
Thank you. Yes, this is ordinance number 2599, an ordinance of the City of Salisbury to amend Chapter 15.26 rental of residential premises of the City of Salisbury Code by adding subsection 15.26.035 rent increases bar during states of emergency, and authorizing the mayor to issue such executive orders as are necessary to protect tenants from abuse. Whereas the mayor and council of the City of Salisbury desire to update the Salisbury Municipal Code, and whereas the state of emergency was declared by Governor Hogan on March 5th, 2020 due to the pandemic known as COVID-19. And whereas Governor Hogan has issued multiple executive orders in an attempt to reduce the spread of COVID-19, resulting in the shutdown or slowdown of multiple businesses in the state of Maryland. And whereas one effect of COVID-19 pandemic is record high unemployment rates, and whereas it has come to the attention of the city that some landlords have terminated leases, advised tenants to vacate rental premises, and engaged in campaigns to mislead tenants into leaving their homes or agreeing to the payment of higher rental fees, and whereas the Salisbury City Council has concluded that it is in the best interest of the city to prevent the dissemination of misleading information and to amend the city code to freeze increases in rent and rental fees during the state of emergency to maintain the status quo, now therefore be it enacted and ordained by the City of Salisbury that Chapter 15.26 of the City of Salisbury Municipal Code be amended by adding the following subsection to Chapter 15.26. That subchapter is entitled 15.26.035. It's in rent increases barred during states of emergency. It defines under subparagraph A, emergency. In this section, emergency means the catastrophic health emergency declared by the Governor of Maryland on March 5th, 2020, as amended or extended by the governor under the State Public Safety Article 14-3A-02, and such other emergencies as are declared by the governor or the mayor, pursuant to Salisbury Charter Section 17.4 of the City Charter and sections 2.08.020 and 9.08.220 of the Salisbury Municipal Code. Subsection B, scope. This section only applies to rental fee increases on existing tenants during an emergency. Nothing in this section shall be construed to apply to leases for new tenants. Further, nothing in this section with respect to an increase in the tenant's portion of the rental fee applies to any public housing authority who must comply with federal laws, regulations, or other federal requirements to determine a tenant's rental fee. Subsection C, in general, a landlord may not increase a tenant's rental fee if, subparagraph 1, the increase would take effect during an emergency, or subparagraph 2, notice of the increase is not in compliance with subsection D of this section. Subsection D, entitled Notice of Rent Adjustment, subparagraph 1, during an emergency and within 90 days after the expiration of emergency, a landlord may not increase or notify a tenant of an increase in rent or a rental fee. Rental fee shall include any fee for service, a product or commodity provided by the landlord by a third party to a tenant prior to the declaration of an emergency. Subparagraph 2, pre-emergency rent increase notices reads, a landlord must inform a tenant in writing to disregard any notice of a rental fee increase if, small I, the landlord provided the notice to the tenant prior to an emergency, and subparagraph small I, double I, the effective date of the increase would occur on or after the date the emergency began. Paragraph E, late fees prohibited. Subparagraph 1, late fee is defined in this section as any additional charge or fee imposed because a rental fee is not made when the rental fee is due under the terms of a lease. Small double I, late fee includes a fee imposed under subparagraph A as a flat rate, subparagraph B as a percentage of the rental fee due, or subparagraph C in any other terms. And then paragraph E2, in general, a landlord may not charge, assess, or otherwise seek to collect a late fee from a tenant for non-payment or the late payment of rental fee that comes due during an emergency. And then under subsection F, or section F, I'm sorry, payment plans, paragraph 1, landlord shall offer payment plans to tenants for the payment of rent and rental fees to be in effect for no less than 1 year after the expiration of the emergency. And subparagraph 2, upon request of the tenant, landlord shall work with tenants on an individual basis to arrange payment plans for the payment of rent and rental fees in installments, which will continue for no less than 1 year after the expiration of the emergency. Subparagraph 3, all payment plans shall be in writing and signed by the landlord and tenant. Section G, notice to and protection of tenants. Subparagraph 1, the Housing and Community Development Department must post on its website information regarding the requirements of this section, including the date that an emergency expires and the date that is 90 days after the expiration of the emergency. Subparagraph 2, during an emergency, the mayor is hereby authorized to issue any and all executive orders necessary to protect tenants from being victimized or misled by the actions of unscrupulous landlords. Violations of such executive orders will constitute violations under this chapter and be subject to arrest and misdemeanor charge under 9.08.220 of the Municipal Code of Salisbury. Section H, landlord's right of review. The provisions of this subsection do not limit a landlord's right under the applicable provisions of the Salisbury Municipal Code to an administrative review of a violation notice. And subsection or section I, enforcement by tenant. In addition to the enforcement action by city officials, tenants may seek relief from an appropriate court to restrain or enjoin any violation of 15.26.035 of this subsection in accordance with state law. And be it further enacted and ordained by the city of Salisbury that the ordinance shall take effect upon final passage.
Thank you, Mr. Tillman. Comments and questions? Ms. Jackson? April, you're muted, I think. Julia, is April muted?
Yeah, I'm trying to unmute her. It won't work on my end.
Okay.
April, you got to unmute yourself, it looks like. She's having troubles. There you go.
The only question that I do have about this is I thought in a prior work session that we discussed a meeting about as far as the governor's stay and how people were to represent or present that the reasons why they were late on their rent, and if it had anything to do with the COVID situation and them being out of work. Is that not true, or did I misunderstand?
I don't recall that, April, but you can ask the question, Julia or Mr. Mayor.
I think there was some discussion with respect to whether or not that might play into payment plans. It would have no impact whatsoever on the notice, as it is still illegal under state law and municipal law, and will be enforced through both housing and community development and the police department to attempt to remove someone from their property without a court order. That being said, when it comes to setting up a payment plan, that's something we can either administratively require in the executive order. I'd have to work with Mark on how we do that. I wouldn't recommend editing the legislation, but we could certainly work on.
No, but I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, because obviously we don't want people taking advantage of. We don't want somebody to be taken advantage of in either way.
Okay. That was my question.
Anything else? Thank you, April.
You're welcome.
Ms. Blake?
No comments at this time.
Thank you. Mrs. Gregory?
No comment. I just think this is very necessary.
Thank you. I do have one question. At the last work session, I had brought up the fact that the only thing that I can see that's a real issue is a duration before the thing goes into effect. Because I think I gave the example, and I asked Mr. Tillman and the mayor about a snow emergency, for instance, when a state emergency could be cleaned up in 5 to 10 days. Well, as soon as you do that, the way it's written now, the 90 days where they could take advantage of the rent and payment plans kicks in immediately. And I believe when I went back and looked at the minutes, they were going to propose some time period. None was recommended, but I would think, if it lasts 30 days or longer, this issue, then it's if it's a snow emergency, that's where there's a necessary to make sure everybody stays off the streets. That's a different situation. So I was wondering if there was any discussion relative to putting in a minimum before the thing kicks into effect.
I don't remember or recall any direction to make a change in the legislation, but it could easily be done in the definition of the emergency.
Yeah, and because I remember asking you
yeah.
to, and you said, yeah, we can do that.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be an issue. So, Mr. Mayor, comment relative to that?
So you're saying, an emergency lasting X number of days, something like that.
Right.
Right. Yeah, I hear you. And I think fairly obviously, a snow emergency is not going to lead anybody to. We've never declared a state of emergency for snow while I've been here. But even if we did, it would take probably 5 days to put together the executive order. Yeah, but I understand what you're trying to protect against. Some, wacky mayor, wackier than
right.
me, right? Saying,
yeah,
nobody should have to, pay rent.
Right.
But I mean, that would also, remember, that would require the courts to be closed. This doesn't supersede, this in no way supersedes Maryland law, which, if the courts are functioning, then people are going to, be removed if they're not paying their rent. This doesn't change anything about Maryland law. I think it's a hypothetical that can't come true. I understand your point. I think at this 11th hour, I would hesitate to try to make up a number of days. But you can rest assured I wouldn't.
Oh, I'm not worried about you or us
at all for snow.
Yeah, I'm not worried about you or us.
It's me they're worried about.
No, it's not you either. It's not you either. Stranger things have happened in the past, prior to this administration. That's what I'm saying.
Let's think about let's just think about the implication for a second on this legislation. This does not give new powers to the mayor to create states of emergency or anything like that. That's already existing. This is specifically allowing for the rent facets of that. It repeats language that's already existing in the law with everything else except for rent and the impacts on rent. So just trying to think what the impact of saying emergencies that last longer, states of emergency that last longer than X number of days. We've had a tornado in this community, one tornado could have caused more people. Some people were removed from their homes due to power, water damage, wind damage, trees falling. The incident was brief, but the impact was long. I think it's incumbent upon us not only to think about what the potential spans of time might be during which an emergency might be declared, but also what this is about the effects and what the effects are on vulnerable populations. Again, if the government were entirely responsible for providing housing, like the government is entirely responsible by ourselves for dealing with homeless people once they no longer have housing, it'd be one thing. But the private sector provides housing, and thus it's either 100% of the costs of housing every homeless person needs to be shifted immediately to the private sector, and the same businesses that are responsible for providing housing, or we've got to provide some protection against making people homeless during a crisis. And I think that's why we're doing doing the latter. So I don't know. I think we could come up with a reasonable timeline. Sure. I think there are reasonable numbers of days that could be introduced there, Jack. But I also think, it's muddy water rather than being situation dependent. And I completely understand what you're trying to protect against.
Yeah, and because every population or group has their small percentage on both sides. And what you don't want to do is we don't want to penalize either side. We want it to be fair to both. So I feel strongly that we should put a time period in. And I don't know what the rest of the council feels, but anybody that wants to comment, please comment on that. If not, then we'll go forward. Ms. Blake, you have any comments?
Okay, so I'm understanding you're looking at a time frame for after the state of emergency is lifted to make a payment plan.
No. What I'm asking for is before the plan kicks in. Mm-hmm. Instead of if something's going on for more than 30 days, there's an issue. I have no problem with that. But if it's something shorter, and again, I'm not saying that that's what our mayor or we would do. but there are mayors that are going to come after us. And we've seen some crazy stuff prior to, go back 9,
Yes.
10 years.
Yes.
So that's my point. That's my only point. Think about it. I'll come back to you. Ms.
Okay,
Jackson,
thanks.
any questions or comments?
Not at all.
Okay. Mrs. Gregory?
I don't, the example that the mayor gave about, tornadoes only lasting a few minutes, but the impact lasts for quite a while. Now I'm not sure what the procedure is with the state of emergencies for something like that. But I think, yes, there is the off chance that this could be abused by a future mayor, but hopefully we will have a council at that time that can negate that. But I think the legislation is good as written. It doesn't overwrite Maryland law, and I think it should stay as it is.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Blake, anything further?
No, I don't have anything further. I think in my thought, there's enough timelines, and I think it's clearly about this pandemic. That's just my thoughts. I think it's okay the way it is at this time.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Last call.
Mr. President.
Hearing none, I'll call. Yes.
This is Mark Tillman speaking. I was going to say that if to pass this evening, it obviously is only going to affect this incident, but we could certainly discuss some tweaking at a future work session for future emergencies. Clearly, none have occurred at this point, so it's not urgent. But if you want to address it in a future work session, we could do that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tillman. At this time, I'll call the motion. If you all in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Ms. Jackson?
Aye.
Ms. Blake?
Aye.
Mrs. Gregory?
Aye.
And the chair votes nay. The motion passes 3-1 with 1 absent. Thank you, everyone, for that.
Hey, Mr. President,
Yes.
may I real quick?
Yeah. Go right ahead.
So I know we've got some property owners on the call. What I'll share with them is that we'll get the letter that must be distributed within 5 business days out tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll sign the legislation before I leave. We'll get that letter out. It will, Mr. Tillman has been working on it. It will clearly spell out that everyone must pay their rent. No one is absolved of any obligation under any contract. It'll also just spell out their rights to remain until they're removed by a court order. Hopefully we've run into few of those situations, but we already know we've run into some in our community. So thanks for everybody's patience. Recognize it's a challenging topic, but again, we've got to do what we can to protect people and keep them under a roof while this coronavirus is happening. So thank you.
Understand. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to approve ordinance number 2600 for the first reading.
So moved.
Mr. Tillman.
Thank you.
We have, who made the motion, please?
April.
Ms. Jackson. Okay. Second,
Second.
Ms. Blake seconded. Mr. Tillman.
This is an ordinance of the City of Salisbury approving a budget amendment of the FY 2020 General Fund to appropriate funds for Frontline worker stipend. Whereas the city of Salisbury determined many of the city employees have performed services due to COVID-19 are deserving of a frontline worker stipend. And whereas the city of Salisbury estimates the cost of the frontline worker stipend to be $151,248.25 to departments in the general fund. Now, therefore, be it ordained by the City Council of the City of Salisbury, Maryland, that the city's fiscal year 2020 general fund budget be amended as follows. Paragraph 1, increase current year surplus by $151,248.25. Paragraph 2, increase police department by $67,281.25. Paragraph 3, increase fire department by $67,012.13. Paragraph 4, increase sanitation department by $9,688.50. Paragraph 5, increase infrastructure and development department by $4,844.25. And paragraph 6, increase housing and community development by $2,422.13.
Thank you, Mr. Tillman. Any questions or comments? Ms. Jackson?
No. I think it's a great thing. I think it's a great thing that the city is doing, and I kind of got caught off guard here, Jack, because I'm reading this ordinance myself.
No problem.
But I think it's a great thing, and I'm glad we could do it. I'm glad we could do this for our city workers.
Thank you. Ms. Blake?
No comment.
Thank you. Mrs. Gregory?
No comment.
The only thing that I would say is thank God for these people. They've done an excellent job. They put their lives on the line, and I'm very appreciative, and I'm sure the rest of the citizens are as well. If that's the only comments, then we will call the motion. All those in favor of ordinance number 2600 for the first reading, please signify by saying aye. Ms. Jackson?
Aye.
Ms. Blake? Angela? Angela?
She's muted.
No, they can't.
We can hear you now, Angela.
Oh, okay, great. Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Gregory?
Yes.
And the chair votes aye. The vote is 4-0. Thank you, everyone. At this time, I'll open the floor for public comments. Ms. Glanz, would you be the gatekeeper, please?
Yes. It looks like if Chris Adams is still on, she raised her hand to speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, everybody. I'm glad to see everybody's faces, glad to see everybody's healthy. I just wanted to make a couple of comments in reference to ordinance number 2599. You know, it's an emergency ordinance. I haven't really ever seen an emergency ordinance put through in the 25 years I've been in rental management. And so I thought, my God, it's emergency. Let me find out what the facts are in this case. And you know, I heard a lot of innuendo, slander, if you will, basically where members, some of you folks got up there and acted like it was normal. I mean, the impression that I saw was that this needs to be enacted because it's representative of your current housing providers, that we need this kind of legislation. And so I did the research, and many other SAPOA members joined me, and SAPOA stands for Salisbury Area Property Owners Association, in case anybody doesn't know what that means. But we did investigate the reports that city leaders used in the media to justify this emergency legislation directed at the local housing industry. I'm sorry to report that we have found no truth to the accusations of illegal evictions directed at SAPOA during council meetings and during Jake's daily show at 5 p.m. We found no cases of illegal evictions. And so now I've just come to the point where I would appreciate some transparency. And I believe the city has a duty to produce the facts to justify this emergency legislation. The city has produced no evidence evidence to back up the need for this legislation. You've said we need it. Everybody seems to be stating that this is absolutely necessary, but we don't know what you're talking about. We haven't, I honestly have been in this 25 years and I've talked to every landlord that I know, and I don't know anyone who has illegally evicted anyone. So I'm still at a loss as to why this was necessary. I would like to know how many people have been illegally displaced. I would like to know who those landlords are. I would like to know where those displaced residents are being housed. And is HCDD handling the rental housing, and they handle rental housing and code compliance? Are they investigating these incidences? To me, this treatment has been especially disappointing because through innuendo, you guys have insinuated that our industry it's representative, that we are walking around evicting people. We are bending over backwards as an industry as a whole. And the years of partnership that we've been talking about seem to have been cast aside during this pandemic. I'm not sure I understand why. I guess you must have felt that this was absolutely positively necessary to have, cast aspersions on us in this way. I find, as a person who wants to be included in her community, to be hurt by this. I know I've heard several council members say, oh, why do you feel hurt if it doesn't apply to you? I feel hurt because you guys felt the need to cast aspersions on your fellow townspeople who are doing the very best we can. The very best we can. We are a small business doing the best we can. And I don't think that this was the way to go about coming up with this type of legislation. And I have to be honest about that. Unfortunately, I've observed this pattern through the years of how accusations come about, and they materialize whenever there seems to be a fee involved. And this all started with a fee, and now we're here. And I would just say to you guys that, I wish you had come to us in the beginning where we could have partnered on this and helped you. I think we could have avoided all this had we been asked to be part of the conversation instead of treated as though we're the pariahs once again of the community. And I'm saying it from the bottom of my heart. I don't appreciate being treated that way. And I don't think many of us do. And I hope in the future that from this lesson, we can learn that you can come to us as opposed to be treating us this way. And that's what I have to say about that. I hope it doesn't, I just feel very violated by it. And I know I'm not the only person. Once again,
Chris, can you wrap up, because you've exceeded
that's all I had to say. Not that it's going to make a difference, but at least I said what I had to say. So good day, everyone.
Thank you. Julia, who's next?
Ms. Ashanti is up next.
Okay, and I would like to remind everybody that they have 4 minutes to make their comments. Thank you. Mary, you're up.
My name is Mary Ashanti, and I'm president of Wycomico County NAACP. And I really didn't call in to speak to that amendment, but I want to commend you for that amendment because the renters need for someone to speak for them. We know that we do have slum landlords. This does not address that, but so I'm sorry that the landlords feel like they've been abused in any way. But my real purpose for calling is I want to thank the mayor for the June the 5th, the National Gun Violence Awareness Day, whatever. But one of the things that I want to share with you on behalf of the community, I'll just make a comment and then I'll tell you what I need to tell you. We must all speak up when we see injustice. And Benjamin Franklin said, justice will not be served until those who are unaffected are as outraged as those who are. And I'd like for you to keep that in mind. The June 5th event, I hope that it does the trick. I hope that it addressed this last killing of George Floyd and whatever, because That's the most recent one, and the one before that. But the other thing that we want you to address and speak out against, and I'll read it so I won't take up your time. It's not necessary for Wycomico County to support a Second Amendment sanctuary resolution. We hope that you will speak against the resolution because Maryland laws should be followed by all residents of Maryland. To support the Second Amendment sanctuary amendment is set in Wycomico County and Salisbury, because what Wycomico County does affect Salisbury and how it's viewed. People who have set themselves above Maryland law. Please make it clear that you, Salisbury, will not support a Second Amendment sanctuary resolution. It is your job to uphold the laws of Maryland and not support any entity that sets itself above the law. Also, is the Second Amendment sanctuary resolution what Salisbury, the city of kindness, wants to be known for? Gun owners' rights are currently protected, and it's just necessarily for law enforcement to enforce it. So we're not against the rights of any legitimate gun owner, and Maryland has the necessary laws. So I'm hoping that even though this is not a city resolution, you are part of Wycomico County. And if you don't speak up against it, it means to us in the Black community that you are for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. It's good to see you. Julia, next up.
Doesn't look like anybody else. Oh, Alan. Don't know your last name, Alan. You can, if you
All
can.
right.
Yep.
Thank you. Alan, your 4 minutes will start. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll be very brief. Everybody can hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Last name Goodman. I'm a evil landlord within the city limits of Salisbury, Maryland. A city I'm proud of, a city I love, city I live in on purpose, one that I've moved to after I graduated college 30 years ago. And generally, I'm very supportive of our mayor. He's a champion for the city. He does a lot of wonderful things. My concern about item 2599, and I'm new to this forum, so please forgive me if I don't have the right vocabulary, but my concern is there's nothing COVID or emergency related in this legislation. So any person at all, even a doctor or a lawyer, can just arbitrarily stop paying rent. And if this event takes 9 months, it'll be a year before they're obligated to pay back any of that 9 months. And then they're going to have an additional year to pay that. And that doesn't seem reasonable to me. Whereas the state legislation said that people who have lost their job or their income as a result of this emergency have protections. And that's all I had to say. I yield any additional time.
Thank you, Mr. Goodman. Appreciate your comments. Julia, anyone else?
Well, it looks like the mayor would like to speak, but before that, Lynn. Oh, go ahead, Lynn. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. And I hope everybody can continue to stay safe and well throughout all of this. And I wish Godspeed to our mayor as he leaves to serve our country. All of this is unprecedented. Who knew on Friday, March the 13th, that schools wouldn't reopen and we'd have a temporary ER and an extra morgue sitting outside of PRMC? Who knew? Who knew? None of us knew. So this legislation came about primarily because of that unprecedented circumstance. I do appreciate Jack's comments, and it was something I went back and listened over again last night to the entire work session. It was a topic that was brought up about putting some sort of limitation on at what point does a state of emergency reach the place where this legislation would kick in. And the comments at the work session were from Jack and from Yor, and they were supported in concept with you, Mr. Mayor, saying that it seemed like that was something that could be discussed and tweaked, as well as Mr. Heath even asked Mr. Tillman to come up with wording at that work session. It maybe something could be added. The first version had nothing added as in relationship to that. But again, at any point that there's a state of emergency, once it's been called a state of emergency by the mayor or the governor, then once it's ended, then there is a 90-day period of time during which all of these events take place that impact paying and getting caught up, and a year of to make your payments on things. So it's that part of it that seems so ambiguous to me, and so possibly causing issues in the future, that I would like to see something be discussed further at some point, an amendment. I don't know whether you can even amend it once it's been passed. I don't know how that works, but I absolutely do believe that there should have been something that said any state of emergency lasting for longer than 30 days, then these protections will come into place for folks. I also do believe that there should be something put in there somewhere, if the working documents, April mentioned it, something that says you get a payment plan and you get some of these, you get protections if in fact you were affected by it. And that's the reason you're not paying, because it would be like me maybe going to Roadie Joe's and asking for a hamburger and then just saying, Jeremy, I just don't have the money, bill me for 12 months for the hamburger. But in that, that's unreasonable. I wouldn't go to Walmart and ask for that. You know, it's just unreasonable, in my opinion, as a person that pays bills. But I think there should be something somewhere in the guts of the mechanisms in this ordinance that says, just like with your water bills and just with like when the governor's issues, that you need to provide us with something that says, why should we be doing this? I just had a client right before this meeting. She paid me her month's rent, all good. And she said, I just have to ask you a question, Ms. Bratton. Everybody's saying you don't have to pay your rent. I know people that have the money and they're just not paying their rent because it's going to be forgiven. So I know your letter, Jake, is going to address that, but I don't know I just don't know. I think it's just it's a tenuous situation right now. And I would really appreciate if somehow April's comment about some sort of proof be thrown into the mix somewhere, some documentation, something that says you were affected, and or something somewhere, if possible, just to put something that says in a severe emergency lasting more than 30 days, then these provisions will then kick in, not a 7-day clean up the streets because we have a blizzard. Okay, that's all. Godspeed, everybody. I have other things, but you've read my memo. I sent things out to everybody. I am still curious about where it all fits in the courts. So there you go. That's a question I have too. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn.
I heard the dinger, Jack.
Yeah, always have it.
I want my red light, green light.
Yeah,
I want the buzzers.
Yeah, that too. Thank you. Be safe. Any other comments, Julia?
No, but Lynn did ask about the rental assistance that we're working on, and Mayor, I see you, with Salisbury Neighborhood Housing Services, and we are finalizing that application this week and working on getting it translated into Spanish and Creole as well.
Fantastic.
So we will be sure to let everyone know when that is live.
Fantastic. Thank you. Mr. Mayor.
Mr. President, just a couple of closing thoughts.
Yep.
First of all, evil men don't wear crab hats, Alan. So you're in. we know you're not evil. But no, thank you for all the comments. I wish Chris was still on. I wish Ms. Adams was still on so I could address a couple of things. But maybe we can get these thoughts to her. One, I want to point out that there's nothing emergency about the ordinance that's any different from any other ordinance, except for the fact that every day we have renters contacting the city saying, hey, I'm being told I have to leave. Is that true? I thought the governor closed the courts so that people couldn't get kicked out. And let's remember that the strategy that Governor Hogan employed, taking the option of court order away from evictions, meant that the intent was not to get involved in the contractual relationship between landlord and tenant, but rather to say, no matter what, nothing can cause you to force someone to leave. It can't happen. And that's not a city law. That's state law. You've always needed that at the end of the day, because people have not paid their rent before, and they were wrong when they didn't pay their rent a year ago, and they were wrong 3 months ago, and they were wrong 5 years ago when they didn't pay their rent. Everyone should pay their rent and whatever they're obligated to pay. But when they don't, ultimately we leave it to the courts to handle that. With respect to Ms. Adams' concerns about an insinuation or inference with respect to people or people attempting to illegally evict, there's been no insinuation. We've used the names of companies, and we'll do that if that's what people want. But we've continued to collect every instance, every letter, every memo, every email that has been given by landlord to tenant saying that they have to leave by a certain date. And we have collected all of those. It has been our intent to use those to communicate. We can certainly turn them into the Attorney General. We've talked about that. Or Office of the State Prosecutor. We've talked about that. Those are certainly options. I think more importantly, we want people to just be able to stay in their housing until they're removed legally, or to at least understand their rights. I think people need to understand their obligations, their responsibilities, which is pay the rent and pay every bill you've got. And then they need to understand their rights, which are that if I don't, or if I fall behind, what are my options? And the option one is you can stay where you're at until the court tells you to move. And that's what this order does. With respect to the limit on time, the legislation that just passed does not provide that. So I think it would be inappropriate for the mayor through an executive order to put a lasting executive order saying something like a certain number of days. I mean, the legislation is the legislation. It says we can do it anytime. But the only time that I can recall that we've instituted a state of emergency since I've been in office is during a flood and during this event. And the flood impacted very few homes and affected them. They couldn't be in their properties anyway. So their relationship with their landlord was handled directly without the city being involved. But in this instance, it's obviously very different. With respect to COVID-related impact and payment plans, I think we can easily, in the executive orders, clarify what type of evidence needs to be provided in order to require the payment plan to be a mandatory part or a mandatory offer from the property owner. So I think we can identify that. We'll just follow the state, whatever the state requires, we'll just follow that. If the state says, you've got to have something showing that your hours were limited, or you lost your job, or you're on unemployment, then we will require the same things, or we'll accept or ask the landlords to accept the same evidence as a designation. But even today, I just want to get back to the claim from Ms. Adams. There was no evidence. We found no evidence. Well, that's because nobody's calling you. They're calling me. I'm the person they call, or they call their council member when they don't know what to do because they feel like they're going to be kicked out of their housing. And there is no evidence collected anywhere else. So it's sort of a misdirection. Don't look over here, look over here, to say, we researched it and found no evidence. No research was done by Ms. Adams or anyone else. Because there is no other way to research it. You'd have to have access to my email, my voicemail, or council person Jackson or Gregory or Blake or Keith or Boda to know. And that's the only way you'd know. So the evidence is plentiful. It exists, and it indicts many, many property owners. But it's also not representative of all property owners. It's a couple of names, and it's some of which we've never heard of before because they have one or two properties, and some of which are the largest landlords in town. And I know Ms. Bratton knows some of them because I've shared some of the names. But I think that about covers it. We'll do everything we can to get that letter out and translate it quickly, and to get guidance out. Once we submit it, I know you've got a short period of time to turn around, so we'll make sure we get it to you and with clarity very soon. Last couple thoughts. I just want to thank Ms. Ashanti for her comments and agree with respect to the notion of 2A sanctuary. I think that's problematic here for a number of reasons. One of which we abide by the Maryland Constitution. We don't adopt laws that say we're going to ignore it. I think following the law is important. Every single law enforcement officer that works for me, so every city police officer, including our chief, is going to uphold and defend not only the United States Constitution, but the Maryland Constitution and the laws of the city of Salisbury. And so, passing resolutions that are symbolic in nature seems not only frivolous and unnecessary, but seems to suggest that some people are willing to tell their sworn law enforcement officers, trained, certified Maryland police officers, to ignore the law, and we're not going to do that here in Salisbury. So any resolution passed at the Wycomico County level would be immediately and directly contradicted here in the city of Salisbury. As is true with any resolution passed by the county council, it has no effect within the city limits of Salisbury, as we have our own police force that ultimately works for the city administrator and then the mayor. So I wanted to close with that and to say, lastly, one other thing. There was a comment about fees, that this all started with fees. This has nothing to do with fees. This has only to do with keeping people housed, meaning our discussion of 2599. But with respect to fees, I do plan to send a budget amendment to the council to ask them to consider to remove the fee increase for this year. This has nothing to do with fees. Police, it's important, and I would ask anybody who still has contact with Ms. Adams to remind her, this is only about the coronavirus crisis, not landlord registration fees. But I do plan on recommending what we've talked about before, which is removing the proposed increase in our unit registration and landlord licensing fees for fiscal year 2021, recognizing the increased financial burden on property owners. That's all I got.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If anyone else, Julia, that's it?
It looks like it's it.
Okay. In that case, I will adjourn the special meeting and surprise everyone. Now we're in the June 1st work session. And we have several items on the agenda. First up is Laura Soper with a proposal about transitioning a quarter of the revolving loan funds into downtown COVID-19 emergency. Laura, you're up.
Good afternoon, Council.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Over the last few weeks, I've been working on putting together a micro grant program to help some of the businesses that have been impacted by the state of Maryland executive orders that required either a full or partial closure of some business types. And the program repurposes a quarter of the funds in our existing revolving loan fund towards a separate micro grant program for businesses within that revolving loan boundary map. The total amount of that fund is $69,888. And I've spoken with some other municipalities about how they've done it to learn from their best practices. And essentially what we do is we'd open the application period for a period of 1 to 2 weeks and then enter all the eligible applications into a lottery system. And the most the applicants could apply for is up to $2,300. but they need to be able to demonstrate a tangible use for that funding and provide proof that the funding was used for that use. So I think some eligible uses are mortgage or rent payments that they may have missed, utility payments, paying payroll for some of their employees. But there has to be a very tangible use for it. And in speaking with the other municipalities, I made my program a 2-tiered program, with tier 1 being the businesses that were mandated to fully close with the state of Maryland executive orders. So in that, you'll see the non-essential retail and salons, tanning places that would rely on foot traffic and had none. So those would be our tier 1 businesses, and tier 2 would have to demonstrate a partial closure. So tier 2 would be restaurants that could still order carry out. So after that, the tier 1 businesses would enter the first lottery, and we'd select eligible applications from that before moving on to tier 2. So I think that pretty much covers the program, but if anyone has any questions, I can answer them.
Thank you, Laura. I think it's a great idea. I wish it was more.
It actually, and I'll give you a heads up. In a few weeks, I'll be bringing another, it's not a huge amount, but probably 12,000 towards that as well, as a repurpose for a grant program. I know it's still not an overwhelming amount, but I think it will still be able to help those businesses.
Great, thank you, Laura. I'll call the roll, and please, if you have any questions or comments, state them first, and then also at the same time, would you state whether you agree with moving this forward? So Ms. Jackson, you're up first.
No comment, and I agree with moving it forward.
Thank you. Ms. Blake.
No comment.
No comment, and please move it forward.
Thank you. Mrs. Gregory.
No comment and move forward.
Thank you. And I concur. We have a consensus to move it forward. Thank you for your work on this, Laura. And I hope we have enough to give almost everybody something, but who knows?
So
Yep. Thank you.
thank you.
Next is a budget amendment for Gordy Road water main. Ms. Pollock, how are you?
Hi, good afternoon. Doing well. How are you?
Very good. Thank you.
So this is a budget amendment request. We recently bid the Gordy Road water main construction as well as the contract administration and inspection contract. And this is a key water project for the city where we will be looping the distribution system of water from the north to the east side. This is currently an area where we do not have a water main, and it provides extra redundancy from water coming from our paleo plant into the main part of the city. So it's a critical water main that we've had in the CIP for some years. However, bids came in a little bit high. We received 8 bids for construction, and the prices ranged from $2.1 million to $3.6 million, and our budget was $2 million. So I'm actually quite pleased with the number of bids we received. And the low bid was $157,000 high on a $2 million budget. Contract administration and inspection also came in a little bit over budget by $24,000. That contract's $141,000. So all in all, for both contracts, we were about $182,000 over budget. So we looked at possible other sources for this money. And of course, first we do value engineering and tried to determine if there was something we could eliminate or change from the scope of work. We were not able to identify anything. We had actually bid this project as both a directional drill or an open cut to see if there was cost savings. So we're going with the most cost-effective option. It is a very straightforward project. It's on a county road. We had worked with the county on the pavement details. So we really weren't able to find anything to make this a smaller scope. If we don't do some section of it, then it won't connect on both ends. So we're at the point where I wanted to seek other funding because, again, I do feel like these were good bids. We received 8 bids and it was a good range, and we're satisfied with the low bid. We've called the references of that bidder. So we looked at monies that we haven't spent on other active projects, and the Fitzwater lift station project that's under construction now had come in under budget. So we looked there first. We have still considerable contingency left for that project. Since it is still going through construction, we're going to need contingency. Part of that project was funded with the lawsuit proceeds from the treatment plant of years ago. Yep. And same with some of Gordy Road. So it made sense to transfer some of the unused lawsuit proceeds that are in the Fitzwater project account now to Gordy Road. We still have considerable contingency left in Fitzwater. I did not shortchange us there. But I think that is a reasonable source for a budget amendment. So what we did look at with the budget amendment, though, is providing ourselves with contingency in the Gordy Road project as well, approximately 5% contingency. So the request for the budget amendment is $300,000, and that would give us 5% contingency in both the construction and the construction administration and inspection accounts. And we do propose to take that from the Fitzwater lift station project from the lawsuit proceeds.
Now, one question, taking that money out of Fitzwater, you're comfortable with the contingency that will be left for that project?
I am, yes. It's in the range. What would be left is about $700,000 on a $4.2 million project. So it is still quite considerable. Okay.
And the other thing is that project, the Gordy, that's an all or nothing.
It's really an all or nothing. Yeah, we could not find any way to shortcut it. And it's a very needed project as well. I should have said the budget was from FY16. So we've had the $2 million for a little while. So it's an older budget number, which is part of why these came in a little bit high. Gotcha.
Questions or comments, same request. Ask questions, make comments, and say if you'd move it forward. Ms. Jackson?
No comments and move it forward.
Thank you. Ms. Blake?
Same thing, no comments and move it forward.
Thank you. Mrs. Gregory?
Ditto here. No comment, move it forward.
Great, I agree. You have your, you're gonna have your contingency in both.
Great, thank you.
Right. Next up, 1305 South Division Street annexation plan. I heard Mr. Holland, I believe, on, and I see Mr. Sullivan on the call. So
good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Whoever wants to go first. Bill?
For annexation. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. This is another annexation for 1305 South Division Street. It's the former a place where Skateland used to be many years ago. It's now the home of Mitchell Martial Arts, Classic Cakes, and many other small businesses. Their request to annex is the need for city water and sewer. It's approximately three acres. Back in May 16th, 2019, the Salisbury Wycomico Planning Commission forwarded a favorable recommendation to the mayor and council that the property be zoned general commercial upon annexation. I want to turn to the fiscal impact statement and just briefly go over this. When land is annexed into the city, it's immediately subject to municipal real property tax. The total assessed value of the annexed property determined by the Maryland State Department of Assessments and Taxation is currently $1,665,000. And using the real property tax rate set by the city, it can expect an annual revenue of approximately $16,650. When bringing property into the city, there comes a cost, and that's approximately $12,000. and would have a net positive income of approximately $4,500, probably likely more. But the city also charges or imposes certain user fees, capacity fees, which city charges to applicants for permits and users of certain public services provided by the city. The city capacity fees to charge for the water and sewer utilities are based on the number of equivalent dwelling units, or EDUs. It's estimated that this property will require approximately 31 EDUs, and currently under the current budget, in the 2021 budget, the city charges $3,533 per EDU. And if all 31 EDUs must be allocated for this property, then the city can expect to receive a one-time connection fee of $109,523. Further into the agreement, the petitioners also agree to install sidewalks along the full public road frontage and within the annexed property in such a manner as determined by the city's Infrastructure and Development Department. Additionally, the petitioners agree to pay at the expiration of 365 days after the effective date of the resolution, $27,304.25. The design and construction of the facilities required for this extension of the services of public water and wastewater utilities to the annexed property will be governed by a public works agreement between the petitioners and the city of Salisbury, which will be executed as soon and as practical after the annexation resolution becomes effective. That's pretty much all I can say about this. I don't, if you have any questions, this, like I say, this property is fully developed with 2 freestanding buildings and houses numerous small businesses there.
Yep. I fell many times in Skateland. It hurt. I was not the best skater. Mr. Sullivan,
I did myself.
Mr. Sullivan, anything you want to add?
There are a few points I'd like to add. First is the owner of 1305 South Division Street and the president of the condo association that is in charge of the maintenance of that area is on the call this afternoon. That's Mr. Brett Davis. He's authorized member of BDMK LLC, which owns a majority in terms of the number of assessed properties that would be subject to this annexation. One thing I'd also like to add is I'm happy that it was included, but the annexation agreement that was included in today's packet was actually, I don't want to say it was a first draft. It was a 99% complete draft. Everything else has since been filled in and was sent along with the other documents. But the reason why I'm glad that this particular annexation agreement was added and not the annexation that, for instance, has the address lines filled in is because those provisions that are highlighted are the provisions that I think are most up for discussion by the council, and goes to show you some of the intricacies involved in this particular annexation and some of the fees that are charged or imposed to the developer for this particular annexation. And those highlights begin in section 9, subsection D at the bottom of page 5, and are also provided again in subsection E. The developers already prepared detailed site plans because they intend to move quickly with respect to their site development work. This is a property that is not necessarily looking down the road for connection, but instead this is a property that will seek immediate connection to city water, sewer, and utilities. So unlike annexations that might take more of a perspective feel, like for instance, the one that was done several months ago for properties located on Johnson Road, where there wasn't really any plan for immediate development. In fact, there wasn't any proposed plan for the development at all. Rather, in that case, the property owner recognized that in order to develop the property, he'd have to be annexed. So he just went ahead and did it as soon as he acquired fee simple title to it. Here, we have a situation in which the wastewater facilities that serve, and they're not wastewater facilities, excuse me, they are private sewer facilities that serve 1305 and all of the units located on that property is failing. And this is a property that provides very needed, very much in demand, and to my knowledge, very popular childcare services, specifically at the Mitchell Martial Arts Complex. And the reason why the provisions in the original draft under subsection E were highlighted is because, unlike a circumstance like Johnson Road, for instance, in which these are broad stroke public utility improvement provisions, this is something that the developer will immediately intend to act on. And so all of those provisions remain the same. None of them are changed, but I'm glad that they were highlighted for your review tonight. I would also say that with respect to the scope of this particular annexation, it goes without saying that this is a much more comprehensive annexation than is usually brought to the city for their consideration. And primarily that doesn't have to do with the actual size of the land. For instance, the city has annexed over 40 acres before. But in this case, you're talking about a property that has 31 different tax assessments. You're talking about a property that will effectively have 31 new businesses or facilities that assist and are operated by those business owners within the city. So there are a lot of fiscal impacts to the benefit of the city, in my opinion, that were not accounted for, such as personal property tax assessments and any other type of licensing fees that may be charged for commercial complexes like this one. So in my opinion, this is ready for the mayor and council to move forward with. And I know that the developer is interested in moving forward because the wastewater treatment service to that property needs to be addressed in order to facilitate the ongoing business concerns of Mitchell Martial Arts and really the entire complex as a whole. So with that, unless there are any particular questions for me, I would cede the floor to Mr. Davis and allow him to provide some more information for your consideration.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Brett, good evening.
Good evening.
Right.
Yeah, good to see you again today. Thank you, Mike. You're awesome. I think you gave a perfect summary of this. I did want to make a couple of notes. We are seeking this not out of just a desire to make renovations, but there is a need. The Mitchell's Martial Arts, who is our partner in this property, they have a camp which can house up to 300 kids, and this currently runs on 2 different septic systems. But as my understanding, we have the largest septic systems in Wycomico County with how many kids are currently using them on a daily basis, which is not a bold fact to be excited about. It is terrifying that we have that. You can imagine they have days where there are upwards of 800 people there. So 800 people using 2 septic tanks. I pump them currently every 2 weeks. So this is not something I'm overly excited about. We will, it's something that just, it's more of a need. So I don't want you guys to think that there's some type of, underhanded reason. So a lot of this is being done voluntarily. We volunteered to have the sidewalk put in because we want that. We want it safer walking traffic. We're going to angle our parking spaces to allow for easier traffic flow in and out. We've just put in new street lights there with LED panels. We added a monument sign. We're doing all this because safety first, especially with all the things that are happening around the United States. We want to make sure that our place is well lit and that vandalism and anyone walking down that street can feel safe. So then the only comment I do have on what Mike said, there should be a note, the EDU count. I apologize. When we first stuck this in, was actually Mike did it based on the number of tax assessments. But Mike also did, when he originally created this, we have 8 or 9 storage units in the rear of this shopping center, which are unfortunately each one a tax assessed unit. Yes, so we have 8 square foot units. Literally, just imagine a closet. accidentally has its own tax assessment. So the EDU count will be closer to 22 to 23. Not that it changes anything. The city is still making a very large amount of money off of this. And we're, well, you know, I'm not complaining about the amount, but that is something worth noting, Mike, and I will make that provision. I don't know if that needs to be done in this hearing, but I note that. I apologize. When we did this first set of revisions, we've revised this many times. I just didn't notice it, but hearing the number doesn't sound right. So that being said, we will bring this thing up to code. We do also, the other biggest issue is that currently we have classic cakes. And if you know how many cakes they make, you can appreciate them trying to take, they don't use any grease. So I have no concern over that, but a septic system is not designed to handle, you know, the production of like thousands of cakes a week. So it's just been something it's a real mess, and it's really, it's making it so it's difficult for these people to operate their businesses. And I like the city of Salisbury, so I'd much rather be a part of it, and I'd like to enjoy the services. And right now we're an enclave, so know that every single spot, every single piece of land surrounding this property is city property, except for us. So we're the odd man out, and it's, I think when trying to improve the city, removing those enclaves is pretty important. It makes the map look a lot more reasonable, and I'm sure it makes it functional. So we've done a lot of our due diligence. Like Mike said, there will be some slight modifications because unlike the other projects, they're talking about running a water and sewer pipe to an empty piece of land. There is the logistical nature of the fact that after you guys give me the thumbs up, I'm going to get on site. Something is realistically going to say, oh, wow, well, we didn't realize that this, once you start digging in a pre-existing 70-year-old building that has been owned by, I don't even know how many people, but quite a few. So just wanted to give you those two notes, but otherwise we're really hopeful to be a part of the city and pay more taxes.
Mr. Davis, if the number of EDUs is going to be different than 31, I think it was coincidental that it turned out to be the same number of tax assessed properties. That was the EDU calculation that was shown on the first page of the site detail. So there were 16 for the school and 15 for retail. So if those calculations have changed, just make sure that the site plan gets changed.
Yep. We will, that was based on, just so everyone's aware, we did it based on, Bill had suggested somebody, I don't remember who exactly did this, but it was based on something in working with the city. So not trying to scapegoat any of that, but we will, we'll have that properly detailed. I will make sure to pay the proper amount of EDUs, but it sounded a lot higher than what we had originally looked at.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Thank you, Michael.
Absolutely, thank you. You should make sure with Amanda I haven't left anything out, have I?
No, I think we're good. Thank you.
Okay.
And Amanda, you know what question I'm going to ask you. I think I got it in my head, but is it left 31 EDUs?
Oh. Well, no, they're not asking for the waiver right now. This is what,
okay.
Yeah.
I would like to ask for that waiver.
Yeah, we're not asking for that at this time.
You got to get in line for that.
Yeah. Usually during annexation, we're in negotiation, so we're not.
Okay. Good enough. All right. We'll go. Any questions? Same rules. April. Questions, comments, or if you should move it forward.
Question, no comment. Move forward.
That was good, April. Mrs. Gregory, we'll take you next.
No questions, no comments. Move forward.
Thank you. Ms. Blake.
Actually, Jack asked my question. It was about those EDUs, but that's been answered. I'd say definitely moving forward.
Great, thank you. I concur, moving forward, look forward to the project. Thank you, Mr. Davis. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Bill.
Mr. President, can I say one last thing before you move forward?
Sure.
Just want to thank Mayor Day for his service to our country, but most importantly, I want to thank him for his service to the city. I was born in Salisbury and have lived here most of my life. And I can say without a shadow of a doubt that this city and the development and the improvements that have been made across the board, not just those physically, but those to the spirit of the community, have never been matched before in my lifetime. We'll miss him all really dearly. And I hope he's safe, because I really want him to come back and be our mayor.
We can all echo that. Thank you, Michael.
Absolutely.
Michael.
You have a good evening.
Yep, thank you. Next up, we have a comprehensive connection charges discussion. Mrs. Pollock, you're back up.
I'm back. Now, I know you've had a long meeting and this is a really long topic. So I want to start by saying I'm not looking to advance this after this meeting. I feel like this is discussion number 1 and we're going to have many discussions on this topic. So I wanted to put you at ease with that to begin with, because if you looked at this package, there are many, many, many pages, and we actually did not even draft the ordinance because there's so much that could change through discussions. We just wanted you to be able to see this. So I'll start by saying we had hired a consultant back in 2018 to look at our water and sewer charges in general. And the first thing we addressed after we got their report 2 years ago was the water and sewer rates. But they had also looked at all of our comprehensive connection charges. So this discussion is stemming from that and making sure that our comprehensive connection charges are equitable and that they're essentially doing what we want them to do, incentivizing growth in the right area. So we've gotten comments over the years that some of our comprehensive connection charges are confusing. And I'll give an example. There's a central system line fee that's only charged if you're in kind of the core original part of the city, but it's based on the square footage of your property. I've always found that a little peculiar myself because it does not relate to your water or sewer use. You could have an extremely large parcel and put a single family house on it and you're paying a small fortune in that charge. So there's been things like that we've gotten comments on over the years. Also, the way our capacity fees are currently based in the code, it's based off of a 10-year capital improvement plan. And I think you all know from being on council, it's difficult even having a realistic 5-year capital improvement plan, let alone a 10-year. So there's some things that we've wanted to change for many years. Our capacity fees were last addressed in 2013. So they are a few years old. That's the last time a 10-year CIP was passed so that we could change capacity fees. So what this consultant proposed, and I'm just going to walk through the memo a little bit and then the code as much as you want, but I was not planning to go line by line the code unless you want to do that on this first discussion, but I'll go through the memo. What the consultant proposed was an equity-based fee that would take the place of capacity fees and the central system line fee, so that a new developer, it's still a growth pays for growth concept, but you're buying into the system at a rate that takes into account the value of the existing system. What is the replacement value essentially? And so there is a value of the water system and a value of the sewer system. So there would still be a water component and a sewer component. They put a lot of work into looking at all of our data from GIS on the size of mains, the age of mains, the water plants, the wastewater plant, to come up with a value of each of the systems. And then there's a equation that they use to calculate what I'm calling a connection fee. So instead of calling it a capacity fee, let's call it a connection fee. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later and trying to simplify some naming. But essentially you take the value of the system and you would subtract out any current debt or any grants that paid for that system. So you're really looking at the value of the system that the city paid for and dividing by the capacity of the system in equivalent dwelling units. And because we're looking at water and sewer separately, we're looking at 2 different capacities. And what we tried to do was look at the capacities that we are rated by permit. So on the water side, we have a water appropriations permit that tells us how much water we're allowed to withdraw during the year. And the average is 7.67 million gallons per day. There are provisions in that permit for higher months, but that's your average annual permit for water. For wastewater, our new wastewater plant is rated at 8.5 million gallons per day. So that would be the capacity of the wastewater system. And then we converted those values to equivalent dwelling units, or EDUs, where one single family house is one EDU, and it is approximately 250 gallons per day. And we do reflect that number in our code. So based on that calculation, the fee would be, and then adjusting it to this year using inflation, a water connection fee would be $5,058. A sewer connection fee would be $4,688. The total connection fee per EDU would be $9,746. So one advantage of this is it simplifies the fee system, and you have one connection fee instead of a variety of fees that may be a little bit confusing. This is also based on the infrastructure of the system. So there is the existing equity as well as capacity built into the system. So we'd have a little bit more flexibility on what to use the fee for, where right now capacity fees are used for only capacity-based projects. I think you'd have a little bit more flexibility here to use it for any type of infrastructure project. But I do want to note that this is a significant increase if you look at it and compare it to just a capacity fee. And as you know from capacity fee waivers, a lot of times developers just think in terms of capacity fees or impact fees. And currently our capacity fees per EDU are $3,533. This combined connection fee was $9,746. So it's significantly higher. However, we do have incentive programs to try to focus our growth in specific areas that we desire to have growth. And we'll talk about those in just a minute too. But I'm very conscious that this is not the best time of the economy to look at increasing a fee dramatically. So I did just also want to mention that while we're talking about it. So a couple other things with the code and fee names. There's already been another fee that's called a sewer connection and water tap fee. And that is to reimburse the city when our utilities department and field operations actually goes in and installs a lateral and taps a main. To make it clear, since we were calling this a connection fee, I would rename that as a sewer lateral and water meter tap fee, because then it's a more literal name. And that's only applied if we do that work. We've left that in the code. It tends to be the preference of utilities that an outside developer or an outside contractor be used. However, they are set up still to be reimbursed. And the way this is phrased now is that utilities would give an estimate for the work and then charge for the actual work. The other thing that we're changing the name of is the facility fee. Facility fees are a little bit confusing and people don't necessarily understand what that means when I just say facility fee. So I'd like to rename it as the infrastructure reimbursement fee. And that's essentially what it's doing. Is a facility fee is either the city has extended lines to an area, or more commonly what we've seen more in the past decade is a developer has extended lines to an area and they are able to get a reimbursement for that. So I think calling it an infrastructure reimbursement fee is much more understandable when you're a new developer coming in and you're getting hit with all these fees and here's this facility fee and what does that mean? Infrastructure reimbursement fee means somebody else has put in that infrastructure, you're paying them back for it. And we have many, many instances, especially on the east side of town out towards Warwick, where developers have put in pieces of infrastructure and then as others tie in, they're subject to that fee. So that yes.
Could I interrupt for a second?
Please, yes.
I'm reading everybody's face on the, and I'm almost guessing now we're at that point in time where we are starting to lose individuals. They're not snoring yet, but it's getting pretty close. If I could suggest, because it has been a long meeting. It's 6:05 right now.
Yes.
Let's put this on the first item on the next work session.
That's fine.
And we'll all be fresh and ready, because my capacity is about an hour and 20 minutes. And then my brain starts to fry, and I'm there, I think. So I would ask you to do that. Would that be a problem?
Oh, no problem at all. No, and I understood. I knew this was going to be a long technical discussion, and we would have numerous discussions. No problem at all.
The one thing that I think would help us, because I read the thing, and that was enough to put me over the edge.
Hey, I wrote the thing.
If you can come up with a glossary of terms.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
I think that would help us all. It certainly would help me. Get it on one sheet of paper, glossary of terms, and then now we know what we're talking about.
Absolutely.
So that would be my request.
Absolutely.
And
okay,
thank you.
We'll be back in 2 weeks.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
No problem.
And last but not least, we can take care of one more. Ms. Glanz, you got oh, this is nothing. This is just the budget amendment for attorney fees. Mark's
Yep.
okay if we just don't discuss it. He's shaking his head, or no, he's smiling, but I don't think he is. Why don't, let's take care of this this item.
Yeah, so before you, council, is a budget amendment for city attorney fees in the $45,000 range. Speaking with Mark and his team, there's been a number of additional fees and allocations made towards the company number one lawsuit, which unfortunately keeps on going. So I'm sure Mark can get into the details on specific things, but many of them were regarding depositions and document collections and things like that. So if you have specific questions, please aim them towards Mark, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Mr. Tillman, any comments or questions?
No, the bulk of this, I mean, there's always one every year because we always budget a lower amount, but the bulk of this is due to that lawsuit. And the lawsuit is just incredibly, just by the circumstance of the COVID-19 now been pushed off again. We did all of the discovery and preparation in this, months ago with tons of depositions and things that we had to do. We have not really made any headway with the attorney on the other side. We were attempting to work out some, resolution of this, and he made unreasonable demands that make that impossible to go forward with. But in addition to that, we also have had all the extra things that have been done as a result of COVID-19 and all these emergencies that cropped up for the past several months that we did not anticipate at the beginning of the year. It just never occurred to me that we'd be where we are today. But
now this carry us through. This carries us through June.
Yes, this carries us through June. And, as in the past, I've overestimated this by 10,000 or so, and that money is just returned if we've overestimated it. And it could be that as a result of this case now being kicked into sometime next year, it could be that we'll do less preparation this month than I previously anticipated. But I did just get off the phone today with the attorneys that are working for Legit, and we will be filing motions before the end of June. So they were very anxious to do that, and we have to do it along with them.
Good. Okay. Questions or comments from everyone? April?
No questions, no comments.
Move it forward?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Blake?
No questions, and move it forward.
Thank you. Mrs. Gregory? You're muted, Michelle. There you go.
Sorry, there we go. Yeah. Go, move it forward. No questions.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I guess you're going to get paid.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
No problem. That completes the list of items on the agenda. Anything for the good of the order, Mr. Mayor?
Mr. President, Ms. Jackson, Ms. Gregory, Ms. Blake, Everybody else, see you in a year. This is my last council meeting. I'll see y'all later, but this is my last council meeting.
Yeah, it is.
So,
and come back. Make sure you come back to us safe.
I will. It's a promise.
All right.
I'll miss you
and
all. I'll stay in touch.
Give those little girls a big hug.
I will.
I'll be praying for you, Jake.
Thank you. Thank you, April.
Mr. Gregory, you have comments or closing remark?
Am I still muted?
No, you're good.
Okay, good.
All right.
Closing remarks. I just want to say, I didn't get to say it earlier, but as recently as an hour before our meeting, I was getting information about a tenant who was being threatened with eviction. So, you know, it's not something being made up. This is stuff that's actually happened. I've received emails, calls from constituents who you know, have been facing these problems. So this isn't just something. Sorry, dog wanted to be heard. Today, it's the time of day that everybody in the neighborhood wants to walk around. Anyway, sum it up. Black Lives Matter. You know, I hope everybody stays safe and make sure you're wearing your masks.
Thank you. Ms.
Just if you're healthy enough, please, you know, be very, very mindful that the peninsula is in need of blood. Please go donate blood. And Jake, our day, honey, you will be back and in full gear sooner than we all think.
Hope so. All right. Thank you, everyone. We are adjourned.